welcome back. Hope you've kept well and stayed safe in these weird times. Next lesson we're going to go through musical notation, and you might sit there and think, well, how does that work for drums? Because it's not a tuned instrument, it's a percussive instrument. But there are musical notes for drums, and you need to learn how to read them, both for learning the rudiments and also for drum kit work. Some of the notes look a little bit different to what you'll see in other instruments, but they are in a musical stave, just like any other musical instrument would generally read. So this lesson you're going to go through, I'm going to bring a graphic up on the screen and we'll go through the musical notation, what they're traditionally called and what we tend to call them in drumming, because drumming is very mathematical and it really is subdivisions of notes that determine speed and tempo and other things like that. So we will go through the musical notes, but I'll start using them by their more probably mathematical name that drummers commonly refer to them as, rather than using them by their traditional sort of orchestral name. So you have something called a stave. It has 5 lines and it's where you write musical notes onto, and that is the same for all instruments. There are 2 clefs for drums. For music, sorry. The first one is the treble clef and the other one is the bass clef. The treble clef is where most tuned instruments play, like guitar, piano, other instruments like that. For instruments with a wide range, like a piano and choirs, for instance, we get a wide range of sounds, you might have both. You will have 2 sets of staves, 5 lines grouped together, and the top one will be the treble clef, the bottom one will be the bass clef. Drums are generally written in the bass clef, okay? And in a lot of books they won't even bother writing a clef at all because it's just assumed that you're in the bass clef. Older books, like our stick control book we're going to use, will actually bother to write it. A lot of the newer ones like Rock School don't bother writing it, but all drums are in the bass clef. It is considered a bass instrument. The next thing you'll see, so you'll see your 5 lines going from left to right on the page. You'll see the clef on the left hand side telling you whether you're in the treble or in the bass range. Drums were always in the bass range. Then the next thing you'll see is something called a time signature. And most common drumming time signature, and music for that matter in the modern age, is 4/4, which means 4 beats and 1/4 of a beat per bar. Now a bar is literally the way we subdivide notes, so we group them into a group of notes and we call it a bar. Okay, and in a time signature called 4/4 you will have 4 of a particular, or the most common type of note, grouped in that bar. Then there'll be a line going through the stave saying that's the end of that bar, and then you'll have another group of 4 notes or subdivisions of, and there'll be a line saying that's the end of that bar. Bars are important because if we want to go back to a piece in music, we say, oh, go to bar 23 or go to bar 50 or something like that. It tells you where you are in the musical score. If we didn't have those, it would be very, very hard to know where to start if we're trying to pick up a piece we're learning or something along those lines. So bars are very important. Time signature is important because it tells us what sort of drum beat we're going to play. As I said, 4/4 is the most common, but there are other common types, 3/4, 6/8. We will come across those quite soon, and then you get into some really funky ones like 7/8 and 5/6 and all these sorts of weird and wonderful drum beats, 5/4, etc. That's for the ultra grades at the top and maybe even beyond. But 4/4 is the most common one. Musical notes, let's look at those next. First one is basically called a breve. Now a breve is the most uncommon musical note you'll see in any musical instrument, and I'll probably at this point just skip past it. The next one is called a semi-breve, which is used in things like piano and guitar, where you can sustain a sound for a long time. We don't use them in drumming. Normally a semi-breve goes across, if you're looking at 4/4, will go across the whole bar. Next one is called a minim. Now, you may see it in drumming, but it's pretty rare. Minims are generally not used in drumming. The next note is called a crotchet. This is one of the most common notes you will see in drumming. So where a breve will go across a whole bar of 4 beats, a minim will give you 2 notes, because effectively it's half the duration of a breve. A crotchet is half of a minim, so it will give you 4 notes in a 4/4 bar. Why is that important? Well, because if you're playing 4/4, each singular beat is a crotchet, and in drumming we call a crotchet a quarter note. Okay, and it is generally the largest of the subdivisions we use in drumming. So a quarter note, it's important to know a crotchet as a quarter note, because that's what we will refer to it in drumming. It is a quarter because it is quarter of a semi-breve. It is a quarter of a bar, which means there's 4 in each bar when you're playing 4/4. Okay. Next note is called a quaver, and that is an 1/8 note. It is so where you have 4 crotchets in a 4/4 bar, because they are a quarter note, i.e. 1/4 of that bar, 4 notes make up a whole. A quaver is an 1/8 note. It is half of a crotchet or a quarter note, hence the name 1/8 note, because half of a quarter is an 1/8, which means that there are 8 of those notes across a 4/4 bar. Okay, so in drumming, when we look at the time signature of 4/4, the top 4 tells us the type of note, i.e. a quarter note or a crotchet, there are in the bar, and the bottom number tells us how many there are in a bar, which is 4, which makes sense. 4 quarters make a whole. Okay. When we get to quavers, we're looking at 1/8 notes, and there are 8 of those in a bar. 1/8 notes and quarter notes generally are the 2 most common notes you will come across in drumming. I would say 80–90% of drumming use variations of those 2 notes. Okay. The last part really is then we get into semiquavers, and semiquavers are 16th notes, and that is what you get when you want to go faster in drumming. So you will do the quickest sort of hitting will generally be 16th notes or semiquavers, which are 16 in a bar of 4 crotchets or quarter beats. Okay. You can get into faster drumming, and that will come in later grades where you get demi-semi-quavers or 30-second notes. You'll see that in some advanced drumming. I've never seen hemi-demi-semi-quavers or 64th notes written in music, although sometimes people will play it just to sort of show their skill, etc. That's really, really fast stuff. So how does this all translate? Well, probably the best thing for me to do is to start a metronome up at 70 beats per minute. So I'm going to use my rhythm watch. Two, three, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. You can hear the sort of accented higher pitched noise on the 1, which tells me I'm on the 1 of the bar. Okay, and then 2, 3, 4. This metronome has been set to 4/4, and that's one of the advanced features you get generally on a metronome you'll pay for, especially an advanced one like this, is that you can pick the different time signatures to put that accent on. So I can make this go to 7s and 8s and 9s, I can make it go to 1s and 2s. Often when I'm playing a gig, I actually don't want to count along bars like that. I'll set it to either 0 or 1 and just have it making the same consistent noise because I just want the tempo. But when you're practicing, it's invaluable having something that can have an accent to tell you where 1 is on each bar. 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. So if I'm playing quarter notes, German grip, as you all know, okay, it will sound like this. 4/4 at 70 beats per minute on this click will sound like this. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, and that is your first part of this lesson to play. You need to put into your metronome 70 beats per minute. That is one of the most common beginner tempos you will learn at. And just play when it beeps. Okay, that is quarter notes playing. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Count out loud. 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. That's an important point in drumming as well. You need to learn to count, not necessarily out loud. It's good to do it when you're a beginner, but you will count in your mind. You may even see people mouth it a bit, but no noise come out when they're playing drums, especially in bits where there's gaps in the music, for instance, and then you're going to come back in. You might do the counting to keep yourself in the right place on the musical score. Very, very important, that particular aspect of drumming is to count. And we will start counting the subdivisions as well. So quarter notes in 4/4, most common place we are at with drumming, 4 beats per bar. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. If your metronome allows it, you will be able to put an accent on that 1 so you always know where you are. So first exercise, give yourself 2 bars of counting, then play 4/4, 1, 2, 3, 4 at 70 beats per minute on your metronome and play that for 4 bars, so 4 cycles around. Okay? Next one, 8th notes, the next most common drumming subdivision. Okay? This is counted as 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. You do not change your metronome. You need to be able to hear and guess and play the space in between the counts, the 8th note. So I'll show you what that looks like. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. Okay, again 70 beats per minute. If it was me at this stage in this lesson, I would split this lesson up into a few weeks. I would spend a week solid playing 70 beats per minute those quarter notes. I'd do the next week solid just 8th notes like we did. And then the last one, 16th notes, which is the 3rd most common type of playing you will come across in drumming. 16th notes we will come across quite quickly in our rudiments, but it will take probably grade 2, so your 3rd grade in, before you'll start seeing them much in actual drum kit work. Okay, because it is harder to play 16th around a multitude of instruments. On one instrument, one drum, it can be easier to play, which is why we'll come across it quickly in our rudiments. We count 16th notes as 1 E and 2 E and 3 E and 4 E and. So the number, the letter E, and, which I normally write as a plus, most drummers do, and as in the letter A. Okay, obviously you'll do it differently if you're speaking different languages, but I speak English, so that's what I'm doing this in. So let me show you what that looks like. 1 and a 2 and a 3 and a 40 and a 1 and a 2 and a 3 and a 40 and a 1 and a 2 and a 40 and a 1 and a 2 and a 3 and a 40 and a... Very important when you're doing these to get them even, okay? Don't have them playing around the beat. 4 16th notes, 4 per click of your metronome, very, very evenly spaced. Important, this is where that brain will play tricks on you. Very important that you record yourself when you're playing all of these, but especially the 16ths. Listen, make sure it sounds very even, okay? So this is all good, and there's probably 2-3 weeks worth of lessons just in learning that to get them evenly spaced to the point where you're really happy with them, and that comes naturally. But you probably have a bias. So I'm right-handed, and you'll notice I started on my right hand for all of those. It's very important in drums that you train your left hand to be as good as your right. And you're going to do the same with your feet. You're going to teach your left foot to be as good as your right. Now actually I'm quite weird. I've noticed this in my martial arts fighting, and even when I was young I used to play rugby at high school. That was another thing I've noticed, but I actually kick left footed, but right and everything with my right hand. So I don't know what that's called, probably just weird. But you will have natural biases between your feet and your hands, normally one side. It's all to do with your brain and what it prefers. Most people are right-handed and right-footed. Left-handed, left-footed people will, in some respects, have an advantage. In others, you will find it quite difficult initially in drumming because you've got to train your right hand to get up to a certain level. My recommendation is do not try and set things up for a left-handed. So you will rarely see drummers who play left-handed. It's just not done. Even if you are left-handed, you play as in a right-handed style. It's always the correct way around on your drum kit. And you will always do the same with your rudiments. You will lead with your right, and then you'll be lucky that your left will take less time to develop, but you will have to develop your right. So the pain's probably as equal as whichever hand you're in. It's just going to be at a different point in your drumming career. But very, very important that everything we've just played, you then play leading with your left hand. So it's quarter notes. 1, 2, 3, 4. Eighth notes. Sixteenth notes. For those keen-eyed people, you probably just noticed a cut between those scenes. Memory has run out on my camera, so I just put a new card in. So we're talking about left-hand leading, and I was accenting the 1 just so you could hear it on here. But the next thing with this exercise is not just leading with your right and then leading with your left, but also getting it even, okay? Make it every hit sound the same. 3, 4. Which means the stick raises to the same height and hits at the same speed and velocity. Very important, especially as you get faster. 16th notes. Make them all sound the same. Very important, because your stronger hand will generally hit harder when you're first learning drums, and you've got to train it to hit softer so that it sounds the same as your left. Conversely, you've got to teach your left hand to hit a bit harder than it naturally wants to, so that it sounds even with your right. You should, when you're listening back, hear no difference and shouldn't be able to tell which hand is which. And that's going to become really important when you get into things like double and triple strokes, etc. Try and make them all sound even. It gets really difficult then. But for now, this week's lesson, quarter notes, eighth notes, 16th notes in 4/4, 70 beats per minute, leading with the right and then leading with the left. And listen back to your recording, make sure they all sound even. Don't make one heavier than the other and harder or louder than the other. Okay? Listen back also, make sure they all sound even. Very, very important. I'm sure when I'm talking and playing I might start to get a little bit uneven at those points because I can't multitask very well. But it's important to listen to your click or your metronome and stay in time, stay even in the spaces in between, hit them at the same point, and have left and right being able to lead. Okay, I'm put this up as 1 week's lesson. You may find you need a number of weeks for this one to get it right. I please encourage you not to proceed on to the next lesson until you've got this bit right. If you don't get this right, you'll just be storing up pain as we get on, and you'll probably end up stopping doing drums because you'll get sick and tired of not being able to achieve what you need to achieve. So spend some time on this, get it right, because this is the fundamental of drumming. Okay, thank you very much for your time. Have a good week.